You are now in the realm of enlightenment and transformation.
Welcome to Chief Speaks.
All music performed and produced by Yu Yang.
Enlightenment and transformation. Enlightenment comes from allowing yourself to journey through the dark shadows of death, the primordial abyss of wisdom's waters. For it is the treasures and mysteries that lie wait in the dark that transform us and propel us to a new enlightened state. One should neither aspire to live in the light nor the dark, but should journey between the two in order to evolve the overall reality into a self-actualized creation. Knowledge is your light as wisdom is your darkness. The bold interplay of the two in your life leads you to an enlightened understanding of yourself and the universe you've created. Male is your enlightenment. Female is your transformation. Child is your evolution. Woman, accept the light into your darkness so it may enlighten you. Man, bring your light boldly into the darkness so that it may transform you. Enlightenment and transformation.
I love you so much because you just don't know what you've just done for me. Thank you so much.
Wow. Okay. This is like the best call I've had in ages on BTR.
So this show was meant for me to be able to hear today, and I'm so thankful.
That's his home.
For now, a new pathway has now been cut in order to get to the Almighty, where there may not have been one. So the communication with them, if they have enough power and strength to talk to us, the communication will be very clear.
That's one of the reasons I don't get into the current events thing too much, because it starts to become a perpetual alarm clock that we just keep hitting snooze on. I speak to the ascended masters, quote unquote. I talk about spiritual stuff, but I also speak about some very practical, we can do today things.
Be as natural as you can be with your spiritual. You can't always go by your feelings, because your feelings are corrupted. Your feelings are just as corrupted as everything else, your chakras and everything else. You got to know what's beyond you, and that's why we have elders. We can't do everything. You can't get everything out of books or weekend certification. You can have the most powerful, ancient, oldest, most, as far as you know, truthful tradition in your hands. And if you still have a dirty spirit, you're not going to get anything out of it. You're not going to learn anything. You're not actually going to grow. I try to teach in a way where I make myself obsolete. That's always been my goal, to make myself obsolete.
I really wanted to, kind of big you up. I think you're awesome.
There's a lot of elders out here right now that want to know what's going on. They're not getting on Twitter and stuff like that, but they want to be up on the new stuff. Sit down and have some conversations with them. It's not always about hearing their story. It's also about being news reporters for them and letting them know, like, yeah, this is what's happening right now. They may tell you something about what happened in Charleston that you couldn't even. Your spirituality has to create the same spiritual family. Okay, and that family exists first inside of you. You have to express the different expressions of that rainbow coalition of spirits inside of you first. Okay, don't let communities hijack that rainbow. The problem is when we come into the conscious community, the dudes are doing the same thing that the women are doing.
I just want to say that I really enjoy your show every Sunday, and my friend and I call it going to church. When we call in, we'll be like, you going to church? And I'm like, where have y'all been at?
God cannot go against its own truth. So anytime you have an inkling that God is going against its own truth, then God is no longer behaving as God. So therefore, the spiritual community doesn't recognize God. You dig where I'm coming from? Or can we have a new thought? Can we step outside of the books for a second and have a new conversation about hair weaves and wigs? Can we have a new conversation about homosexuality? Can we have a new conversation about vegan eating? What are we doing? It's a good day for exorcism.
Hey, good morning. Peace, everyone, and welcome to Chief Speaks. Welcome to Chief Speaks, all right? I hope you all are, I will, that you all are enjoying your dawnings and things are moving swell for you and swimmingly, and more importantly, you're evolving. You know, you're taking the things that you've been learning through so many different modes and so many different outlets and channels. Not just this one, because there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people out here doing the work, but you're taking all the things that you're learning and you're applying them to the world, your world reality. This is Chief Yuya speaking. For those of you who are brand new to enlightenment and transformation, and I'm sure some of you are, because it seems that every strong I'm hearing from a new person who has just stumbled by divine coincidence and fortune, has stumbled into the world of Anu. So I just want to introduce myself and, of course, welcome you, those of you who are coming in brand new, and, of course, those of you who have historically been the counterpins and the cornerstones to this experience that we're building. And, you know, has got some pretty decent momentum at this point. All right. So a lot of you know that we've been speaking on the concept of the undeveloped this month. And every month, of course, we have a different theme that we travel through and that we move through in order to really just kind of put larger thoughts together or put a larger experience together. You know, sometimes it's better to digest in small segments as opposed to, you know, receiving everything at once. And then, you know, sometimes you walk away retaining very little, you know, especially in this format, you know, the audio or slash lecture format is not too far above even reading. You know, when you read, we often don't really retain as much as we'd like to imagine that we do. You know, if you think about it, the last time you've read a 200 or 300 page book, you know, how many words in that actual book do you remember? You know, typically we'll remember the things that jump out at us or the things that really resonate with us, but we may not remember every single word. You know, even if you read an essay that was, let's say, 20,000 words, which is, you know, not very long, but how many of those 20,000 words do you truly remember? How many phrases do you truly remember? So it's similar with this type of format where you're primarily digging into and absorbing audio. We often don't retain as much as we would like to think that we do retain. You know, so the best way to really hold on to it, the best way to really claim the information, the experiences, is to apply it. You know, I've often said, you know, we learn best by teaching. You know, and sometimes teaching is just you know, it's just really we're teaching ourselves in the process. Sometimes when we're teaching others, you know, we're going through a natural process, but we're rediscovering as we're speaking or as we're demonstrating. Demonstrating or demonstration is the best way to retain what it is that you're learning or whatever it is that you're doing. It's like someone could talk to you all day about how to do a certain stretch or how to do a push-up or how to do one crunch, and you can listen to them, but it's not really until it's demonstrated does it usually become clear, and then it becomes even more clear when you demonstrate it yourself. You know, so then you create an experiential connection with the actual process. So with all things that are being shared and being taught, you know, I encourage you all to apply them, because in that way you hold on to them. When you're just talking or you're just listening, you know, trust me, you don't really get as much. Not as much as you think. You know, you're retaining between like maybe 10 to 20% of what you're actually hearing. So in truth, is a very inefficient process. You know, it's almost like solar panels. You know, solar panels only convert about 15% of the solar radiation that hits them into actual DC current or direct current or electricity. You know, so you have a big giant solar panel and only 15% of that panel is actually doing what it is that you desire it to do. You know, as far as the modern mass-produced solar panels, there's a young brother in Nigeria. When I say young, I don't even think he's 15. And he has developed a more efficient panel. So, you know, that idea will soon be stolen and patented. So we'll have a more efficient solar panel soon. You know, they'll probably give him a a place to sleep and stay in MIT and a laboratory to work in and say, this is your new home. You stay here, and give him some T-shirts and some clothes and teach him what McDonald's is and give him some junk food to get addicted to and just keep him in the back room inventing things. But, thus is the way of the world. That's how things go. But in any event, so, it's always good to apply. I say all that to say that now that we reach our 11:11 mark, we're going through our gateways. So as always, again, I want to welcome everyone, and I'm going to get into our subject matter, which of course we've been dealing with signs of the undeveloped. And I know I've said this each segment. I'm going to say it again, just because sometimes it's good to drill certain things in. I'm not saying signs of the underdeveloped, because that would be a subjective statement that I do not have the authority to really make, because even another human that I may create out of my own loins, I can't really say where that human is supposed to go. Well, I really don't create humans. Where that entity and that deity is supposed to go, I can't really say that. That's not up to me. Everyone has their own personal stake in their journey, their own personal stake in their lives. So we can't really say when someone is underdeveloped. And in the same instance, I got you. They're telling me that I'm breaking up. So thank you for letting me know too. So I can't really say when someone's underdeveloped, and I certainly can't say when someone is overdeveloped. It's not really, it's not really my place. So signs of the undeveloped, and what I really wanted to build on in this session, and willfully it should be clear now, I think I fixed it. But what I really wanted to build on in this session was, thank you for letting me know, is the idea of unfulfilled potential, and really explain how that relates to looking at maybe some of the, thank you, Sister Georgina, looking at some of the lack of development within ourselves. And of course, this month has also been about maybe cleaning up your cipher, cleaning up your circle, and really looking at maybe some of the individuals that you spend time around or you share the most sacred aspects of yourself with, who are not necessarily feeding back into the relationship, or I shouldn't say feeding, but inputting back into the relationship, but are primarily feeding. So, this segment or this month has really been about not just analyzing yourself for, signs of undevelopment, but also analyzing those around you who you allow to share air with you. You allow to share your time ration with you. You allow to be a part of, or you contract even to be a part of your life experience and your life journey. It's been about also looking at those individuals in totality and really making some intelligent decisions based on, now you being able to read, some of the signs now. Last strong, what we spoke about was the idea of the different perspectives and bases that we may stand upon, that we use as a way to learn, or we use as a way to perceive, and how sometimes that perception, and when I say sometimes, I'm gonna say 98% of the time, that's, matter of fact, let me up it, 99.9% of the time, when you're coming from a particular base, or you're coming from a particular perspective, you're not getting it. And the truth is, for the most part, are living in this planet, living this three-dimensional experience, or this flesh-like experience, we're primarily going to be focused on perspective, because the fullness of what we are is encased in these boundaries of clay and dirt. I'm referring to your body, but we're almost like golems, that there's a silencing of our greater self, or our larger self, or our unseen self, that really can look at something from all angles at one time. So we're kind of narrowed down, just like when something is created, energy gets narrowed down and channeled through a particular pathway. So whereas something had the potential to be anything, like a child wants to be everything when it's a baby, until you say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then, they have to pick something. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a cop. I want to be a nurse. I want to be a veterinarian, or whatever it is that they come up with. You're narrowing down all of that great potential into one lane, you see, which is a form of ordering. But it's also part of the trapping of the human experience, where things get consistently narrowed down into a perspective, as opposed to being able to, be processed in a holistic manner, which is really more in line with with indigenous thought. It doesn't always have to be this or that. It could be all of it. It doesn't have to be just vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D. It could be the family of nutrients, all of the things that work together in order to create or to make something. So we spoke about that last Sunday, in terms of the different bases that we stand on sometimes, whether it be our world consciousness or our human consciousness or our thinking or our feelings, per se, and how each one of those, because they only represent one way to get to a place, they are essentially flawed. And of course, I'm not telling you don't feel or don't associate yourself with the world, or even with your own thoughts or your own consciousness, but it's important to understand what you're using when you're using it. It's like driving a 30-year-old rust bucket that's falling apart, and you think you're driving a brand new car because your reality has been so distorted. So you end up pushing that car much further than it should. In the cold months, you don't let it warm up until the idle drops below 1 RPM, because you're thinking it's a brand new car. Turn the key and I'm out, not realizing, no, the car's got some age, and, you have to let it warm up a little bit, so it's the same thing with your perspective. Once you understand it, okay, well, it's a little beat up, based on, and that's just a part of being here in this condensed place. Once I came here, all of my great and grand faculties of perception were narrowed down through very primitive channels, and I had to become the lowest form of what could possibly be in order for me to rise back up to my higher form, but better, because I handicapped myself. So once I understand that, I know that I can't trust thoughts, feelings, consciousness, chakras, perceptions of spirit, any of that stuff. I can't trust it 100%. There's always a possibility for there to be more. It's no different than how we came into our understanding of maybe thinking, and especially our understandings of what we now commonly refer to as philosophy. There was a time when our thinking, and when I say our, there, I want you to understand that there's some people who are still in this place. All right, so some people are still there, and some people have developed beyond it. Everything moves at its own time to move. Even if it's moving too late, it's its prerogative to move too late. But in any event, the idea there was that there was a time when we primarily used all of our talents and faculties for the purposes of survival. So even your thinking, you see, we primarily used our thinking to ensure our physical comfort. So our channels of thought always went to a physical response. So essentially, everything was going from upper to lower. And for some of us, we still kind of always feed from upper to lower. So if you can look at your mind or your brain, we'll even reduce it to the brain. If we look at the brain being upper, if you look at it on your own body, and maybe you might look at your root chakra, you may look at your lower self or your base self as being your lower, right? If you want to see it as such. There was a time where we always took whatever was going on in our brain in order to secure the desires, the wants, the cravings, the hankerings, and the paranoias and the fears of the lower. You see, so I'm afraid that I don't have enough money, or I'm coming up short every month. So I use my brain to secure more wealth. I use my brain to secure greater physical comfort. You see, so everything is always going down. Even some of our beautiful pursuits that we don't realize are are still transient. You know, like our music and our visual arts, and the things that we look at from an abstract perspective when we say, well, this is coming from the right brain, our more feminine side, so this must be good, without realizing that well, it's still just one channel. There's a reason you have different hemispheres of your brain. They're supposed to work in concert. But aside from that, still a lot of it still goes to a physical manifestation. So we say, well, hey, I'm going to paint a picture because these are the things that are swirling around, and we use our mental capacity and we use our intellect in order to create a better picture. We use our intellect in order to build a stronger bridge, or to build a better mousetrap, or to create a more sleeker and aerodynamic vehicle. So everything at one point always went from upper to lower, where we were constantly using our brain power in order to survive the physical reality, because it was really about survival, and sometimes even gathering more riches to us, or gathering more resources. Is primarily about just trying to survive what we consider to be the human experience, right? So based on that, man, there's a time when we begin to develop and we start to grow beyond using the intellect or using the unseen to always feed and funnel into the seen. You see, I'll give you a great example. I saw I guess it was a meme. I halfway remember. I was a bit fatigued, and it looked like it was a meme, and or it might have been a short little video of an older woman, an elder, and the meme was really praising her for how good she looked and how well she still physically carried herself despite her years. And often, and I remember glancing at it and then closing it, and I felt it was such a shame, because so often with certain women, especially of certain ethnic groups, after a certain age, the pride solely becomes and their ability to preserve their bodies. But after a certain age, you rarely hear any praise surrounding their thought, their consciousness, or even their spiritual morality. It's always about, look how clear your skin is, look how thick your hair is. Oh, you're still able to do push-ups, you're still able to swim, you're still able to jog. So there's this constant praising of the preserving of that which cannot really be preserved for very long. There's a constant effort to praise and to feed into and to cultivate and to curate the physical. So I use my intellect. I learn about better foods to eat. I learn about safer exercises to do. I learn about better water to drink. I use all of this intellect just to funnel it right down into this decaying carcass, and to make this decaying carcass appear superior to others in my age class and in my age group. So that's an example of that. And I remember looking at that, I think it was yesterday. I said, this is a part of the stupidity of humanity. This is a part of the foolish stupidity of humanity that causes humanity to always end up in a disopportune position over the course of time. So we take all of our high spiritual energy, all of our high intellect, and instead of sending it into the unseen world of causes, we send it down into the seen apparent world of effect. We send all of our ashe always back through our body. It's like a constant process of ejaculation. We're constantly trying to preserve that which is transient to begin with. So that's actually a sign of undevelopment. That's a sign of undevelopment when all of our thinking, all of our rational pursuits, all of our knowledge is not necessarily used to understand what exists beyond thought or what exists beyond the brain, but it's actually utilized to just ensure or to further cultivate a more eloquent, physical survival. You see, I'm going to use all my brain power to get rich so I can have nice furniture in my home, live in a more affluent neighborhood, drive a more luxurious vehicle, which of course will assure me access to a greater quality of mate, so forth, so forth, so forth, and so on. But of course, we find that all of those things that we strive towards in the physical eventually end up becoming a burden on the spiritual. They eventually end up becoming something that the spirit now has to figure out how to cast away in order to truly be more of itself, because we again are already existing within this bondage of and the boundary of clay and mud and sinew and fluids, which of course we call the body. So we've already established that we're existing to a large degree within this physical trapping. Our true selves are existing to a large degree inside of a physical trapping, and what we do is we acquire more physical trappings, which further shield the soul from full expression. You see, and it's not necessarily that we're damaging the soul per se, because we become so physically or transient, in our narcissism, where it's always about the pep in our step, or even looking a lot of the conscious groups, there's a high concentration upon the aesthetic. Hair is a huge thing in conscious groups. Eating is another huge thing. Everybody's a vegan chef. Everybody is a raw food specialist. Everybody makes products for the skin, makes products for the hair, and everybody is selling a greater quality of water. So there is a high focus and concentration, and it's not to say that those components shouldn't be present, because obviously they should. Because we still are seeing the body as a divine instrument, but a divine instrument towards what? Just like the brain, which is part of the body, is a divine instrument, but a divine instrument towards what? But you start to see this disproportionate desire to use all of these different things, like right eating, like proper exercise, like proper rest and whatnot, as a form just to preserve the aesthetic of the body, but not to strive for what is beyond the body. You see, so it's the same way sometimes we get caught up in the meanderings of our intellect. We get caught up in the meanderings of our intellect because we use our intellect to preserve the physical, as opposed to using it to cast off the physical and to go beyond it. What exists beyond the thought? For instance, many, especially who exist within the conscious groups and the conscious arena, they've come to a place where they've realized that there is something beyond maybe some of the pomp and the regalia that we apply to life, or we apply to death, or we apply to transitions. There may be something a little bit more beyond it. For instance, when someone transitions and their body goes into a coffin and then into the soil, some of us have come to a place where we recognize that perhaps there is something beyond that. There is something that exists outside of all the ceremony that we apply to someone transitioning, right? But we know, with just the way that the mind functions, or really the brain, let me make a clear distinction, with just the way that the brain functions, that we can't prove it with 100% certainty that there is something that exists beyond it. We can establish theorem, and we can look at the movement of energy, and we can even look at some of our scientific stratagem, that go on to discover the nature of matter and the nature of energy, and the eternal nature of energy in particular. But we still can't prove it. To 100% degree. That's why many people sometimes, and this has been on some of the older segments, where people have asked, like, okay, well, what happens to the soul after you die? I don't know. I really don't know. I can give you some theories. I'm pretty sure about the parts that I do know, but can I say with 100% certainty I know? Nope. I can tell you what my ancestors have said. I can tell you the visions that I've had, but of course, the visions that I've had, even the deep spiritual visions, can certainly be fueled and colored by what my ancestors have already said to me, and can be fueled and colored by the cultural mind that's been created in me. So I can't say with 100% certainty that I know exactly, but I have a pretty good idea. And even though I've spoken to entities who have transitioned, that's never really been the bulk of my dialogue with them. I've never really concerned myself, never really cared all that much, in all honesty. It's never really even been a question that I've ever asked, even of myself. What happens after I die? I don't really care, to be honest, because I'm more about establishing the beauty and the glory of the system of living more so than I am focused on the goal of dying. So often when we maintain a system, the system will get us through our transitions. It's just like when you have a company. If you have a company that has a strong system, or as you've heard me speak about in other segments, the engine, focus on the engine more so than the product. The product doesn't really matter very much, not as much as many people think it does. I have a great idea for a product. I'm going to be rich. Not if you don't have a good system behind it. You take you take a company like Texas Instruments. I think I've used this for an example once. Which some of you may have never even heard of Texas Instruments at this point, but some of you may remember Texas Instruments as the calculator people. Years ago in school, when you had the privilege of having a calculator, which back then was like having a computer, and the teacher would walk around and hand out the calculators and teach you how to use it. 9 times out of 10, it was a Texas Instrument calculator. And that was primarily the product that company made. But as things evolved around that company, and we began to have calculators in our computers, and then after that our PDAs, and then after our PDAs our smartphones, then having that Texas Instrument calculator, even though it was solar powered and it didn't even need batteries, it just became an obsolete thing. But of course, if you didn't have the company, obviously you can tell, didn't have a system behind it where they could keep up with the change. They were focused more on the product, which was the end goal destination, than they were the actual system. You see, as opposed to, you look at a company like Amazon, right? Amazon first came out. What did they sell? Books. That was it. They sold books, but they had an amazing engine behind them. They had an amazing system behind them. So what happened as things begin to evolve? Well, people don't really read as much as they used to. So will we just die out with the dying out of physical books? No. Our engine is so great that we can inject anything into our system and we can continue. Now, Amazon is, that's the home for everything. You can buy anything off of Amazon. You probably can buy bullets, off of Amazon. But it's because the focus was on the system and not the destination, not the goal. And a lot of times we get confused because we become so goal oriented that we never really establish true systems that will last beyond the acquisition of the goal. When you're only goal oriented, it usually, by the time you reach that goal, it's a very anticlimactic feeling, like, ooh, I lost my 30 pounds. I lost my 10 pounds, or, I got the raise. Okay, so what? Now what? But if you have a system in place, it's easy to insert other objectives very quickly, right? So it's just an example of that I'm giving. Now, with the thinking and the moving beyond that, as I was saying earlier, for a long time, and this was about our development, honestly, in antiquity, we were focused more upon survival than we were on actually, what some would call civilization, right? And civilization, or civilizing, is such a tricky word. You notice you haven't heard me use it much because it's such a tricky little word. To civilize something basically means to take something that was once barbarous and to make it legal. That's actually civilization. So a lot of times we look at civilizing as like taking something that was untamed or wild and bringing it into a certain order. And by definition, that's not really civilizing. Just like something that is considered barbarous or barbaric is usually something that is outside the dominant culture. So there was a time when barbarians were just people who spoke a different language, right? Because language is one of the greatest hallmarks of culture. As soon as you hear someone speak, you get an immediate sense of, their origins or at least their ethnic affiliations. So, if someone was outside of your group, and, this is a form, of course, of xenophobia, just fear of strangers. But if someone was outside of your group or your periphery of cultural activity, they would be called a barbarian. You see, even if their culture was not savage. So, if you were to grace them by allowing them to absorb themselves within your culture, then you would essentially be civilizing them. You would be putting the stamp of approval on their current activity. Well, that's a real slick way to make abnormal and savage activity the norm. You see, by putting it under a banner of multiculturalism or diversification. So, well, over here, we bang out sheep. We like to take sheep, put lipstick on them, a wig, put a little skirt on them, and a little stripper's pole, and make them drop it like it's hot. Then we take them into the back room and we have sex with them. Now that's our culture, right? So let's say that was the case. Well, how would I civilize these people? Would I make them stop having sex? Will stop raping animals? No. To civilize them, I would just make it legal. You see? So it's a very, very tricky word. And as so many words are in the English vernacular, that sometimes you end up saying something that that you don't really say, but you're still even though you don't mean to say it, you're still invoking the same harmful paradigm in that sense. You're still invoking the same paradigm. So anyway, so let's get back to what we were saying. In terms of being undeveloped sometimes in our own thought. And I would say, just before I even get onto that, it's similar to what NAMBLA is really, really focusing on doing, in which they will at some point. It's going to happen. If you guys are not familiar with NAMBLA, NAMBLA is the North American Man Boy Love Association. Pedophiles. They're pedophiles. Okay. So right now, what they're really lobbying hard for is removing the age of consent. Now, some of you may be familiar, in some states in the United States, the age of consent goes as low as 12. In most, it's between 12 to 16. Okay, but it goes as low as 12. And they want to completely eradicate the age of consent, as if 12 is not already low enough as it is, but in that sense, citing different cultures, because they've even gone as far to cite Zulu culture. This is where my ears kind of perked up. No, you don't. Oh, no, you don't. But trying to cite Zulu culture and say, well, listen, well, they were heavily involved. Pedophilia was a strong component of Zulu culture. So, let's civilize that. Now, how do we civilize that? We absorb it and assimilate into our own dominant culture. Now it becomes legal because you're just legalizing something that was outside of you. But that's I almost said a different word. That's total BS. Okay. No, that wasn't a part of Zulu culture. Sadly, a lot of times you have agents who are very enamored with foreign and alien culture. So they betray their ancestors. They twist history. They twist facts. They use certain words in a very deceptive and devious manner, and then send that out into the world. A great example would be I won't say the name, but there's a certain book that a lot of you are probably familiar with where there's a term gatekeepers use. You've heard me talk about this before. The gatekeepers, who many people say, oh, they were homosexual and they were higher. They were the ministers of the actual community, but there was no proof that they ever engaged in any kind of homosexual activity. What was shown was that they were asexual. So they didn't take on wives. But they also didn't take on male lovers. They maintained a level of sexual abstinence, and asexuality is a real thing. But an asexual individual is not necessarily a homosexual individual. But people have used that terminology, and even the author of that particular book, who's a race traitor, traitor, use that terminology to kind of get off a different kind of agenda. He and his wife like to play those games. But anyway, it's not about that. So when we're speaking about using our intellect, or using our minds to go beyond really what we're looking at is root chakra survival and going into that space of living, instead of pushing all of our energy downward, we begin to push our energy and our thought power upward. You see? So instead of constantly trying to feed our need for survival or our need for greater comfort or just our desire, our need, which, are never really fully fulfilled. You can't, it's never satisfied, no matter how much intellect you apply to even creating residual streams of satiation. So I like chocolate, so I'm going to come up with a real slick way where I can have chocolate delivered to my house every day. Well, will that make you happy? No. Oftentimes it's the misunderstanding and the talents that we already have that creates our greatest suffering. You see, because the way we use the talent, and like I've shared with you before, your talents are not, again, I can break dance. I can tie a maraschino cherry stem with my tongue. Those are not necessarily talents. Your talents are just, can you see? Yes, that's a talent. Can you smell? Yes. Can you taste? Do you have fingers? Yes. Do you have toes? Do you have a knee? Elbows? Those are your talents, right? But often we overlook them, right? And we overlook them because we only use what we come to the planet with to further secure what we consider to be our survival, which doesn't bring any peace, doesn't bring any happiness, doesn't bring any bliss, doesn't even bring any steadiness of spirit, right? And oftentimes, like I said, what it does is when we're constantly focused on that, it just causes the spirit to suffer more. I need love, I need love, I need love so bad. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to get a mate. Well, like I've said, there's only really two individuals who can take you to your lowest lows. Typically, it's your mate or your children. That's it. And I'm not saying that it's bad to have a mate or it's bad to have children or anything like that. But a lot of times it's the spirit and the intent that we go after these things with that create the greatest suffering of spirit, because all we're doing is further damaging the manifestation of the soul. Like I said earlier, the soul, you can't hurt the soul. The soul stays imperfect and it stays pure. But what you can damage is its manifestations. You see, you definitely can damage its manifestations. There's nothing that is, and this is an important piece in terms of development. The lesser can never bring harm to the greater. You got to understand that. The lesser can never bring harm to the greater. There's nothing in you that could actually harm the soul because it's greater than you. It's too great for you to actually harm it. Okay. And that's something for you to look at. But you can harm and you can damage how it presents itself within your life, because oftentimes your soul manifestations, just like your spirit manifestations and your spirit expressions, are a victim of your brain. They're a victim of the way you think. So the soul, I'll give you a small example. Let's say you have a child on the playground and a child begins to feel a measure of bliss. It feels a measure of confidence, and the child is spinning around and acting silly, and maybe singing a song to itself, but it's really letting its soul kind of just release itself and go outwards. And then it sees other children looking at it, and then in a moment it feels self-conscious and it stops. So what it does is it locks down that soul's expression or that soul's manifestation. So the soul's manifestation ends up becoming a victim to the brain. You see, not even so much the mind, but a victim to the brain in that sense. You see, but is the soul damaged? No, it's still fine. It's still pure. It's untouched because the soul is not even really localized like that. But the manifestation becomes damaged. So now, as that child grows, it goes, 7th or 8th grade to the 8th grade prom. Are you going to go to the prom? No, I don't. I don't like dancing in front of people. No, I don't. Everyone's gonna look at me, or I'm overweight, and I'm not gonna look good in my dress or in my suit or whatever it is. You see, so now it starts to create these standards of judgment that are completely based off of what the brain is causing it to do. So now the brain victimizes the manifestations of the soul. You see, and sometimes that happens externally, but even when it happens externally, it's us doing it. It's just like you may have a person, a relative, an auntie, an uncle, a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, and they may be that external thinking or quote unquote consciousness, So every time you go to do something that really frees you up and drops and releases you from the bounds of the clay and the mud of the body, they'll look at you. What are you doing? Why are you so happy? What you smiling for? You gotta go to work tomorrow, right? Shouldn't you be ironing your clothes or this, that, or the third? So now your manifestations become a victim to that thinking or to that thought. And many of you, I'm sure, have experienced something like that. And sadly, what most people do for too long, I mean, sometimes you have to do it for a moment. What most people do it for too long is they just remove themselves from the presence of those individuals, right? Because their lack of development has now created damage in their in your personal manifestations. So because you can't understand it, now you've made it so I can't do what I want to do. But understand that something that is lesser than you can never damage you. So in the same way, your errant thinking, your wayward spirit, your out of shape body, whatever it is, your self-righteous and pious consciousness, it can't damage the soul because the soul is just too powerful. You see, if it's less than you, it can't damage you. So anything that damages you, and I'm not just talking about your manifestations, but damages you is either greater than you or on equal par. Sometimes that's hard for us to admit or come to, especially if you've gone through a traumatic relationship that has damaged you. And, we spend so much time speaking about how horrible that other person was or is, and, how we've evolved beyond them and we're better than them, this and that, but the damage is still very much present. And sometimes you'll hear me say things like, which are not comfortable for people, of course. Yeah, that person is your soulmate. How could they be my soulmate and they brought me this much pain and damage? That only your soulmate could. Who else could? Except someone who was standing on equal par with you. Is just through your piety and your perception, you just think you're better than that person. Maybe because you know some slicker words, or you know how to play with crystals, or what a chakra is, or you can spell kundalini, or you can speak to planets, or you see aliens and ghosts. So now I'm better than you. You can't do anything to me. So it becomes a false sense of consciousness based on a false perception, because we're taking all of that great intellect that we have and we're imprisoning and we're damaging our manifestations of what it really is. You see, of what truly is going on. You see, so perception always becomes the cage. It becomes the warden. I'll give you an example, right? Through perception, we could look at let's say all right, here's one, because I saw someone recently on social media posted I think it was Deanna, actually. Strong Mind, Strong Body Fitness. I think I don't know. I could be wrong. Yeah, I think it was her. She posted a sunset. I think it was a sunset. It's not to be scanning through real quick. I wasn't really paying attention. I'm not a good. My social media etiquette is horrible. You know what I mean? I'm just not. I just never got into it in a way where I'm really wheeling and dealing. With Instagram and Twitter and all of that. I find it all very, very boring and very feminine for the most part, because in many of those mediums, you're really just commenting, and that's just not very manly. We produce, we create the event for you to comment on. So it's hard for me to really get into it, but I think it was her. But anyway, so we look at the sunset, we say, oh, this is beautiful, this is happening right now, hurry up and come outside and look at this sunset. Everybody, come on, the sun is setting, look at it, it's so beautiful, the colors in the sky, it's orange and purple and this and that and that and that and that and that. And then we forget that it takes 8 minutes for the light of the sun to reach the earth, so the sun already set. You missed it. You missed it 8 minutes ago. You see, but again, it's perception. You see, so you perceive that this event, oh, that was you. Okay, Strong Mind. She just said it was me. Okay, yeah, I thought it was. All right. So in that sense, you're perceiving that this is happening right now and we need to enjoy this together right now. And you don't realize that, no, it already happened. So you'll never actually really experience a sunset while it's actually happening. Ever. You won't. It just won't happen. Now, I have my own personal theories about that 8-minute rule, but I'm just using that because that's what's generally accepted through science, research, and theory in terms of the time that it takes the light to reach the Earth's surface, that it's typically 8 minutes. Another great example is for those of you who just like to watch the sky, right? You like to go outside and, look at the sun, or I'm sorry, look at stars, for instance, and say, oh, it's a beautiful night. And, I can see the ancestors in the stars, and the ancestors are shining down on me. And, this star looks like this kind of formation, and this cluster looks like this and that and that and that and that. And you begin to form theories based on what you're experiencing in the heavens as reflected through stars, right? And then someone tells you that, most of those stars that you're seeing up there they burnt out trillions of years ago. They're not actually there anymore. You're looking at old residual. So no, there's nothing shining down on you right now. It's an old residual. That star been gone. Right? And well, wait a minute. So now your perception changed again. What the heck is going on here? You see? So you start to realize that when you focus all of your intellect back down into the body, using it that way, it becomes very dangerous because you don't know anything. And I don't mean that as an insult to those of you listening. I'm saying I don't know anything. What I'm saying is that a lot of times what we think we know is based off the highest that we can go is perception. When we get to that point when we're feeling real super conscious and real deep, then we say, well, I can be around anybody because we all have different perceptions, but inwardly there's a self-righteousness where we feel like our perception is still superior, but we can be around other people with lower base perceptions and may not realize sometimes those are the same people that can damage you, right? So you're still on equal footing. Yeah, you read 15 books and you attended over 30 to 40 lectures. You went and got your chakras realigned. You did the aura cleanse. You did this, that. You even received the right hand of Ifa and this and that and that and that, so forth and the third. These individuals can still damage you. You haven't gone beyond them. You see, you haven't developed beyond them. But you weren't able to see the signs because you were using your talents to reach back down into your root or reach back down for your survival. You weren't actually using your talents to go beyond it. I'll give you an example. Like I said, we're seeing is a talent. I could take that same person outside or someone and say, hey, look at the sunset. I've seen a sunset. Let's say it was a person from Arizona, right? Somewhere out there where the sunsets are always beautiful out there. No big deal. Or a sunrise. No big deal. I show them a waterfall or this or that. No big deal, right? what they're perceiving just doesn't really move them like that. They may say, well, I don't think it's beautiful. I may say, well, I do think it's beautiful. Okay, well, now I'll go over to my fireplace and take out my coal stoker, and I'll gouge your two eyes out. Now you're blind. So now what do you think about seeing? So now what happens in that moment, it's not so much the sunset or the star or the sunrise that becomes beautiful or becomes ugly. It's the fact that I have the talent to see it, which becomes the thing that I rejoice in and become very happy about. You see, so it's always using your intellect to move beyond and upward to your higher awareness of the miracle of your own creation, which brings the happiness, not using the intellect to go down into the body and say, well, I'm looking at this sunrise, or this sunset, this thing happened 8 minutes ago. See, now you're using your intellect to rationalize what's happening, which is fine. But you're saying, and because it happened 8 minutes ago, it's not beautiful. You see, that's all keeping you down into the lower, as opposed to saying, well, what is the cause of the sun? What is the cause of the sunset? What is the cause of the sunrise? What is the unseen cause? Because I've already been pushing everything downwards into me, and looking at that, you could look at like an inverted triangle. I've taken all my greatness, which is the larger part of the triangle on top, and I've focused it down into a narrow perspective. Well, now let's overlay that with a triangle that is standing upright, where I'm taking all of the greatness that I've received, all of my talents here, my fingers, my toes, and I can go back through it again, right? My mouth, my lips, my ears, and my ability to smell, my ability to taste, and I'm sending it upward into a narrow focus beam for a search for understanding or for a search for wisdom. You see, so I'm going beyond the prison or the victimization that the mind has already trapped me in, and I'm going up above that to say, okay, why is this here? What is here? Which is what we spoke about in our first segment, the whys, getting into the whys, which often bring confusion, but or even chaos to a degree. But if they bring chaos, then that means we're getting closer to heaven. You see, we're going away from separation and order and segregation, which are hallmarks of our three-dimensional reality. Now we're going back into that realm of chaos because we keep asking why, you see. And if you even look at the letter Y, you'll notice that it opens up like hands that are reaching upwards towards the heavens. You see, so we go above and we go beyond and we look upwards and we say, okay, now I want to understand beyond thinking, beyond rationale. I want to get into philosophy. Well, what is the point of philosophy? What are you going to use that for? And that's one of the first things you ask someone who has a degree in philosophy. What can you do with that? Teach. I can become a teacher of philosophy. And that's when people usually lose interest. Oh, okay. So you basically be a teacher. So you studied all the time to be a teacher, huh? Because what can you do with that is saying, how can you use that intellect to feed the lowest part of you? Whereas opposed, a philosopher may say, no, I'm using this intellect to explore and understand the things that my brain has silently admitted are beyond its own reasoning capabilities. You see, like what happens after we die? I'm not sure. How many people will tell you? How many E5 priests will tell you that? You see? Now, of course, I could tell you what my training taught me about the different levels of Orun. We have what's called the bad Orun and we have the good Orun. Yeah, I can tell you all that. It's my training taught me make sense, break the words down. I can give you, I love my word breakdowns. I can give you all of that good stuff, man. But I don't really know. My teachers taught me. Yeah, the teachers taught me, and I took my notes and I understood what they were saying. But there's a part of my brain that is not responsive to dogma. It says, if you don't know, you don't know, and it's okay with saying I don't know, and you don't know. You don't really know. So that's where we begin to utilize that higher mind or that overmind, as some like to say, that higher consciousness, and we move beyond knowing. We move beyond knowing into just experience. You see, we just move into experience. So one of the signs, like I say, because that's what we're speaking about, signs of the undeveloped, of course, uh, that we pick up a lot of times in ourselves or we pick up in others is the inability to use our talents beyond anything that is self-serving for our own survival. Like, using your eyes and saying, I'm just seeing, and I'm glad, I'm rejoicing. Some of us may have businesses that we're tired of. We got to talk to clients and to people every day that we're just sick of talking to. We don't like them anymore, right? Or jobs. You may have a job where your boss is horrible, or the pay sucks, or the commute is horrible, or whatever it is. I mean, obviously we can go through a whole lot of things that could be wrong, right? Until somebody takes away your ability to work or your ability to run your business. And then what usually happens, we gain a greater appreciation, and we sit back, usually wherever we're confined and restricted, and we say, man, what I wouldn't give, like I'll give you a good example. You ever had a older cranky relative that you took care of, and they used to just love, no matter what you did, they always just cursed you out. And now they're no longer here, right? And then what do you say? Damn, if I could just have another day of them cursing me out, another day of grandma making me run her up to that tired ass church, and I'm trying to, and then I'm coming to pick up grandma. I don't want to get out the damn car and then go in there and talk to your old raggedy ass minister, and he asked me, so where do you fellowship now? I don't answer, grandma, just please be outside when I get there. And she makes me come inside. Come inside. We downstairs. We in the basement. Come inside. You see? And then when they're gone, you have those moments. Damn, man, I wish, I wish I had another moment with grandma. It would make me come inside that church and drive her all around to the food mart afterwards, picking up all that stuff I told her she shouldn't be eating. All them I don't know, what are they, ham hocks and pork, whatever. I don't know different forms of pork. I only know pork chops. Well, let me see. There's pork chops, there's bacon, there's sausage. I know there's a thing called ham hocks and fat back, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, that's not my area. But you wish for those times, man, and tears will come to your eyes, wishing, man, I wish I could just have that moment of experiencing, not judging. I don't want to see grandma or grandpa or my uncle so-and-so or my auntie so-and-so on Sundays because they always make me do this and make that. It's not the judgment of the sunset. It's not the judgment of, the time with them. It's just the joy and the elation that comes from, I have the ability to spend the time. I have the ability to share the time. So it's not about what, man, this is taking me away from what I'm trying to do. Come on, Uncle, Uncle Lou, I was in the studio. You pulled me away from my studio time. And, I'm trying to make this club hit, and, whatever it is that you're into, that you lament about, during the time that they're taking you away from something that you really wanted to do. And you're now judging one experience for the other. Man, I could be in the studio, or I'm laying up here in the bed, with my lady, and we both half naked and eating snacks in the bed. And my Aunt Millie calls me and tells me that she has a flat. Now I got to go over there. Oh my goodness. And then when they're not here, you realize, ooh, it wasn't about the moment. It was about my ability to experience the moment. That was the gift. The fact that I had legs and eyes and fingers, and I could get up out the bed and walk over there, put my clothes on, and go pick my aunt up, or go change her flat tire. And while I'm changing the tire, she asking me, what was you doing when I called you? Whose voice was that in the background? And all of that stuff like that. And, but it's the ability that I can experience that, You see, now that's see, when we get to that place, that's when we start to see that we're going beyond our undevelopment. You see, because our undevelopment doesn't even look at the talent. It has no appreciation for it. It doesn't care. You know, the air here stinks. You breathing, ain't you? Let's hear it for breathing, you know? And then sometimes as we begin to go deeper into our consciousness, we'll study breath. You see, we'll study pranayama. We'll get into sun gazing, you know, or Ayurvedic medicine, where we start to study, you know, the eyes to learn things about the body. And then we become more grateful that we even have eyes. Shoot, well, you know, because I have eyes, I learned something about my liver, you know, or I learned that I'm not drinking enough water, or I'm drinking too much water, or vice versa. But you start to understand the talents and the things that we come with, you know, they're not necessarily just for our survival. That's a cave person's way of thinking. You see, that's how cave people think, where everything that they have is for their own personal survival. It's similar to, again, I mentioned earlier, you take an association like NAMBLA, National American, North American, excuse me, Man Boy Love Association. You know, that's coming out of a culture, and please excuse my vulgarity, where a nut is just a nut. You see, that's where that culture, where that type of organization and that mission that they have of removing the age of consent, that comes from a culture of a nut is just a nut. You know, so whether I'm getting that nut from a pig, from a horse, from a cow, from a little boy, from a little girl, doesn't matter. A nut is a nut. You see, now, of course, it evolves itself, where now it takes on, you know, when when the caveman becomes erect, you know, and he's not just dragging his knuckles now, and he now figures out a way to deceptively convince you that it's more than just a nut. So he calls it the Man Boy Love Association. It's the I'm trying to get a nut without having to learn how to interact with people. This is why, you know, dog is my best friend. You know, I can have sex with the dog, or I can rape the dog. The dog will protect me, this, so forth and so on. And I never have to learn the interpersonal skills that must exist between human and human. I can still remain like a cave person. You see? So a lot of times we don't realize some of the things that we engage in now are birthed from something else. So like I said, that idea, a nut is a nut. You see, so you're using the talents that you have, you're using the expressive creativity that you have just for a 15-second feeling or 20-second feeling, depending on, you know, how backed up you are, you know, but whatever it is, you're using it for momentary elation. It doesn't matter who gives it to you. In fact, you start to develop a culture around being able to receive that feeling from someone who didn't want to do that. See, that's a part of that old Grecian culture. You know, in terms of the homosexual culture of Greece, it wasn't so much about two men falling in love with each other. You know, I know that a lot of times that's the impression we may have. You know, we may say, oh, well, they're man lovers or they're boy lovers, you know, but and again, this is not a total indictment on anyone practicing that sex style. But sometimes it's important to understand where some of this stuff began. You know, it was about domination. So you would right, Brother Lowe says Sparta. Like, so even in Sparta, it wasn't about, or even if you look at the samurai, or you look at the knights, they have pages. You know, it wasn't about so much we got two equals coming together, they're hugging and they're kissing and they're putting their things inside of wherever they can make it fit on each other. It wasn't about that. It was about who dominates who. And let's say if I was a person in Grecian society or Spartan society where I had a name, you know, and I was a powerful member of that society, and it was found out that I was catching instead of pitching, you know, meaning that I was a bottom instead of a top, I was receiving instead of giving, then I would be ridiculed. I may even be stripped from my office, because the act was always supposed to be about me conquering someone. someone, taking something. Very similar to the marital rights. You carry the bride over the threshold, because what is that supposed to simulate? When you stole her and you carried her into your house, what was the throwing of the rice? Well, that's supposed to emulate when their family will be throwing rocks at you because you're stealing their daughter. You see, now we make it rice. It's pretty, it's cute, but we don't. We live an unexamined life. We don't ask, why are we throwing rice? If anything, we should be throwing money or something. Why rice? And why do I have to pick you up and carry you over the threshold? I mean, what's that about? So it's that lack of examination there, and sometimes we don't realize where the roots are. So we begin to almost not criminalize, but we weaponize our talents against our spirit when we move into that place where there's no appreciation for the actual talent, not just what the talent can do. You see, but there's an appreciate. Like I said, we look at the sunset, say, it's all right. Or we look at another individual, she's pretty, she ain't pretty. Well, let's take someone like Stevie Wonder. I guarantee you he would give up all the money he has in the world. I guarantee you he would even give up all of his musical talent in the world just to look at his children and his grandchildren for one time. Just for that. To finally look at his daughter, Saida, and see what, she looks like. Or to look at his grandchildren. You see? So it's not to say that, well, if I focus my intellect into things and I can see more beautiful things, I have a more attractive partner, or I have a car I'm gripping on wood grain and that quality leather, not that thin stuff, but that quality leather I'm sitting on, and I have this beautiful view, that never makes anyone happier. Never. Again, like I said, it only puts a greater burden on the spirit. Now, I'm not saying not to have those things. I like those things. I like gripping on wood grain. I love a view. I'm a sucker for a view. I like nice things. I like finer things, as some people saying. Me, myself. However, I rejoice not in particularly the ability to, or I don't rejoice necessarily in having those things, nor do I rejoice in maybe the comfort that those things may bring. I rejoice in my ability to even process, or to create a system where I can strive towards acquiring those things. You see, because the system, when you learn to celebrate the system, you see, you learn to celebrate the talents that get you to that point. You see? So I may say, well, hey, man, I want to live somewhere where I can see a nice sunset. But the fact that I have the ability to start to get to that place is what I celebrate, because the talents give me that. My fingers give me that. My toes give me that. My eyes, my nose, all of these different things. And that's something to rejoice. And I don't want you to think that we can only appreciate them when they've been snatched away. We learn to appreciate them when we move beyond the undevelopment of survival mode mentality. When we begin to live, we begin to see how life, we're living, right? So we begin to see how life is flowing through all of our different constituents. Like you have some people who love to sing but can't hold a note to save their lives. They just, it's horrible. The sounds that they make. I once was with a woman like that years ago. She loved to sing. I mean, she used to get into it, man. She thought she was Whitney Houston, and she was a gorgeous woman. Gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. But the most horrid sounds would come out of her. Horrible. It was so bad you'd think she was playing, but she'd be dead serious, have her hand up in the air, like, doing that little diva thing. She loved going to karaoke and doing that. And of course, I'd be, I got to hold it down. I'd be cheering her on and clapping. That's right, baby. Go on. You sound just like Whitney, but it was horrible, but see, her expression of her soul wasn't criminalized by the lockdown of her brain. You see, so she didn't feel that sense of, well, maybe I should stop, and I don't sound very good. No, she loved doing it. It made her feel good. There was times when she would be sitting there crying, and I mean singing, she'd start crying. because the words would just touch her, the emotion a certain way, and then she'd sound even worse because she'd be crying and singing, But that was her thing. I never told her to stop. I never said you sound horrible, anything like that, because there was a free, open expression there. You see, now that's a sign of development, even though we may look at it and say, oh, but it sounds horrible, right? But that's a sign of development because I'm moving beyond the utility of this. If I sound horrible, no, I'm never going to get a deal. I'm never going to get an offer to come sing in a club and make some money or anything like that. I'm doing this because it feeds the heavens, or I'm making that quote unquote joyful noise. You see, it is noise, but I'm joyful about making it. You see, now that's a movement and a hallmark towards greater development. We're not always looking for everything to bring us something, but we're sending something. We learn to give. We start to understand that we're partnered here. So easy thing, if you're a person who's in business, or even if you have a family, is a corporate body in many senses. And many corporations, you might have partners, right? Well, if you're doing rituals and things like that, and you're also being shown favor by the unseen world of causes, and you're having good effects in your life, then essentially you have a partner, right? So what do you do for your partner? Just like if we look at ourselves, right? The manifestation of who and what we are came from an unseen place, came from an invisible place, in fact, an immaterial place, right? So we start to realize through that weaving motif, or we look at Obatala, the fabric, the fabric, or even if we look at our Dogon sciences, there's always that weaving that goes on. So there's a partnership there with the material and the immaterial, which is what the weaving represents. Even when you get your Ilekes, it's the same idea there. You have a hole and the bead, and which represents, of course, the yoni, and then you thread the hole. And while you threading the hole, you're saying certain things, which brings the Elekes to life, if you're doing it correct. And I don't mean to get on people, but a lot of y'all keep buying these Elekes out of the store, you know what I mean? And thinking that you can dip them in the water a couple of times, and now you got Elekes, and you're giving those to your godchildren. That's foul. And maybe you don't know it's foul. Maybe no one ever taught you any better, but that's not how you make Elekes. So you're taking that lingam, which is that thread, and you're putting it through the yoni of the actual bead. So it's again that mating of the material with the immaterial. So you're partnered with the immaterial, and when you start to realize that you're partnered with the immaterial, that's where that great joy and bliss comes from. And then you start to feel very confident about giving to the immaterial, just because you recognize, well, no, there's a partnership here. So there's nothing wrong with me bringing my partner flowers, or something sweet to smell, or something tasty to eat, or some water, or some rum, or some gin, or just partying with my partner, because there's an unseen partnership that's going on where there's a mating with the material and the immaterial. And when you go beyond the lower development of just being stuck on the mental plane, not the mental plane, the physical plane, where you're just stuck into your thoughts. See, that's really the basis of atheism, right? And even the agnostic traditions, where it's if it doesn't go beyond my thought, it doesn't exist. Okay. And it's really easy to disprove that. I don't have to do that, but it's real easy to prove that. But when you start going into a deeper level of development, you're going beyond thought. You see, because you start to understand, well, my thoughts are finite, and much of what I'm thinking is based on perception. So the same thing, like I said earlier, like how many times have maybe you walk somewhere, and you thought you found something on the road. It could be a coin or a dollar or something. When you move in closer, you see, no, it's just, a piece of a bolt or something like that, or it's just a crumpled up piece of green paper. You see, so you start to realize that you might have an immediate reaction. You could be walking down the street doing affirmations for wealth. Bring me wealth, bring me wealth. I got to pay this bill, got to pay that bill. And then you see $100 bill from afar. You could be halfway up the block, and then, your blood starts pumping, and, your heart is racing, and you're saying, all right, stay cool, stay cool. I don't want anybody else to see it. Stay cool. But I'm about to take this $100 bill. I'm gonna go pay my phone bill, get my phone turned back, or whatever it is the issue is in your life. And, you're having all of these excited emotions and thoughts that are racing through your head based on what you perceive, and you get up close to it, and it's nothing. It's one of those things they send you in the mail, with like 1,000, it could be a sweepstakes thing, but it was stuck under something and you couldn't really see all of it, so you start to think like, hey, you realize that, man, my perception brought me to a certain place that wasn't real. It wasn't what it really was. You see, so it can be such an interesting experience there, in terms of perception, in terms of what we think we know. So when you move towards greater development, you say, I got to go beyond what I know. Even if we are in the Aquarian age, and this is the age of knowing, this is the age of knowing for the masses. That's cool. But I'm moving beyond where the masses are. I'm poking my head up, and I'm starting to learn that other imposition of the triangle, the one that's pointing upwards, the one that's taking its talents and going up into the immaterial. You see, going downwards is great, and understanding that aspect of the Trinity, and saying, okay, the Savior is at the bottom, and the Savior is giving to me, and this and that and that and that. And yeah, that's awesome. That's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a part of the balance that we need. But when we look at it from the other place and say, you know what, going upward, there's a whole realm that exists beyond perception, beyond thought, beyond consciousness, and certainly beyond my judgment. There's a whole realm up there of activity that really must be larger than the realm here, because that realm seems to have a profound effect on what happens here, but most of us don't really seem to have a profound effect on what happens up there. Because remember, something that is lesser can never damage something that is greater. So as we start to move into development, we go into that greater realm. So eventually what happens, we actually flip the triangle, and we put the one that has the bottom point. Now we send all of our greatest talents up to our other part. So we're not just looking to take all of this ashe and all of this power and praise and put it right back down in the body so we can be 70, 80 years old and still look like we're 40 years old. Who cares? Who gives a crap? Because at the end of the day, you're still 70, 80 years old. Yeah, you look, sir. Who cares? You see, we start to learn that my place of preservation should always go into what's eternal, because my soul is going to quantum leap. It's going to go from body to body to body to body. So why am I stressing this body? I should be putting my stress to the soul, and I should make sure that the body is always a willing and active and cooperative tool in order for me to go to that immaterial. So that may mean I got to exercise. I got to eat right. I have to get enough rest. I have to get enough water. I have to be careful of what kind of fabrics I wear on my body. I have to be careful about who I lay with, and all those different things that may affect my body's ability to interact and partner with the immaterial. All right. So that has been our segment. All right. Went a little bit over, but it's all good. And, willfully, you all have gotten something from what we're building on. Again, signs of the undeveloped, all right, which has been this month's topic. And even though we're coming into that fourth Sunday, we have 5 Sundays in this month. So I'll be back again next Sunday, and then we'll be doing the student panel the last Sunday of the month. For those of you who are part of the men's ministry, you know that the number has changed for the call. Okay, so I believe Brother Anwar has sent out a notification in regards to that, and also we have changed it in the welcome kit for those who have joined or are joining our new Life Global Ministries. You will have, of course, the new conference number that we'll be utilizing. All right. So use what you've gotten and demonstrate it personally. Because if you don't demonstrate it personally, you're not going to remember any of it. I'm telling you now, as excited and as good as you feel now, it's just emotions. Wow, Chief. Okay, that makes sense because I do miss my Aunt Tilly. And this, yeah, you're going to forget. I give you 14 days. You won't remember half of what I talked about. I promise you that. Within 14 days, matter of fact, you'll remember less than that. You won't remember 30% of what I spoke about. That's just the way the mind works, man. So the way you retain the best parts is through demonstration. You see, it's through demonstration. And sometimes that means just sitting still and transferring your consciousness into different parts of your body, transferring your consciousness into different parts of your brain, into thinking differently. And I think like this, I think like that. Sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm sad, sometimes I'm irritated, so forth and so on. You know, we use meditation to observe those emotions and observe those thoughts, you know, and there's an appreciation that comes from that. You know, there's some people who don't feel anything. They have a lifelessness in their eyes, you know, and they would love to feel something. You know, sometimes they'll take a razor blade and slice themselves on their legs, on their arms, just to feel a sensation greater than what they're currently going through at the moment, because they feel like they should be feeling something. You see what I'm saying? So the fact that you can feel, the fact that you can get angry, you know, or you can get upset, or you can get lonely or horny, or whatever it is that you're feeling like you wish you weren't feeling, the fact that you can experience it, and acknowledging and becoming aware of that is what brings you into that higher state of development beyond your root awareness, where it's just about survival. My feelings always have to relate to something that goes in my survival, because when you do that, not only do you burden your spirit with more crap that it has to cast off, but you burden the people around you in your life with that same garbage. Because now what happens is you begin to seek out hyperstimulation. You're that person who gets on the phone with nothing to say, but you called the person, and you're just sitting there because you want them to keep talking. As soon as you get on the phone, and, well, tell me about your day. What are you thinking? What's that? You know, that's all you got. You want them to constantly feed you and feed you and feed you, but you bring nothing to the party. You see, because you've kind of locked yourself and into that space where now you need that hyper stimulation, because you're not enjoying the fact that you can be stimulated, you know, or you don't have those type of friends where when you get together, you don't have to entertain one another. You could just sit around each other, you know, or they may be in one room and you're in another room. It doesn't really matter. You know, you just kind of know they're there and it's cool. You don't have to sit there and you know, be so entertaining for one another. So, you know, a lot of that mentality and that thought, and you notice as we become more developed, we tend to be quieter. We tend to be more at peace with spending time with ourselves, you know, because we become more appreciative of time. We become more appreciative of our own breathing. You know, that's one example, right? How many of you actually use your actual breathing as a form of monitoring? You know, you pay attention to your breath. Okay, what am I feeling right now? What's going on right now? Well, let me see. How am I breathing? This tells me a lot. You know, so you start to really enjoy exploring yourself in a certain sense, and then you love the fact that you can explore yourself. So it's not just, you know, ladies feeling your thighs or your hips or your behind like, I'm juicy. It's the fact that you can feel it and you can process all that thickness, you know, or fellas being able to say, man, I got a big thing. Look at this thing swinging down here. It's the fact that you can process it becomes the joy, you see, because what's causing you, for what purpose are you able to process those things? You know, for your own self-aggrandizing. There's something that comes through this. There's a cause that said, hey, I want you to be able to process this for a reason, you see. All right, so into such time, this is Chief Yuya. This has been another Chief Speaks on Enlightenment and Transformation, which, you know, of course, is a product. For those of you who want to join the ministry, Our New Life Global Ministries. I'm still getting messages on social media. Chief, I want to get a reading by you. Here's my phone number. Give me a call. It's not going to work that way. Go to askosiris.com. All right, that's how you get a reading. askosiris.com, which is different than osirislife.com. Listen, enjoy the talent of listening, please. That's one of the greatest epidemics our people have. We think it's poor education and poor housing. One of our greatest epidemics is that we do not listen. We hear one word and then we start running. If you listen, you wouldn't get conned by so many con artists all the times. If you would listen to what they're saying, you'd hear the contradictions, and we don't like to listen. We hear one word and start running, So Osiris Life is different from Ask Osiris. Osiris Life is for life coaching and spiritual coaching and counseling. Ask Osiris is for spiritual readings and spiritual consultations, but it's a one-time thing. Whereas Ask Osiris is an ongoing thing. I mean, Osiris Life, look what y'all just made me do. Osiris Life is an ongoing thing. Yeah, so I'm still getting those messages, and many of you have noticed that you have not received a phone call back, and your messages have been ignored. I'm not going to respond to that, just so you know. This is your response, all right? So everyone travel safe, man. Be safe, and definitely continue to fellowship among yourselves and utilize opportunities for appreciation, but also for self-awareness, right? Utilize all the opportunities to move beyond your current state of development. And I guarantee you, some of the things that are currently stressing you out will seem much smaller, very similar to going to the beach or climbing a mountain. It's hard to be stressed when you're looking over a mountaintop and you got hawks right above you and owls. And it's hard to think about those bills that are due, or the sheriff sticker that's on your front door, the foreclosure. It's just very difficult, because sometimes you just get overwhelming sense of appreciation, but the fact that you were able to climb that mountain, or you were able to walk across that sand and make it there and sit at that ocean, and you start to realize, well, damn, if I could do this, how many other things can I do? How many other talents and abilities do I have in me? I just walked up a side of a mountain, or I just drove out to the beach, in order to enjoy this. So I have enough energy to enjoy the experiences I want. All right. Until such time, everyone, be safe, be well, be strong. Hotep. Yeah, I said it. Hotep. We still use that, man, regardless of what people say, regardless of how it's been demonized and blasphemed by the frauds. Hotep is an ancient and sacred term that holds beautiful significance for our people. Don't let the frauds ruin our stuff. That's a form of COINTELPRO. So Hotepu.